Honestly, not totally sure how I feel about this. But I thought it was fascinating, and I love it because I don't know if you noticed, libertarians bring up Singapore a lot when they call up this show, and they'll say like, "Well, what about like in Singapore and blah 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 blah, where you have it's everybody has healthcare and it's totally in the market, man, and all this type of thing." So, anyways, and first of all, just broadly speaking, it's kind of astonishing to me that if you're a personal liberty libertarian, you're looking at Singapore. I mean, you're talking about a country that has definitely had a lot of success, but has the type of social controls and social policies that I think anybody listening to this show, and certainly hosting this show, are not comfortable with. I mean, the whole getting caned as a punishment thing is not a myth. Uh, you know, People getting the death penalty for having a gram of marijuana, I think it's as little as that, is actually possible, or certainly incredibly stiff sentences. You basically have had one party rule since the founding of modern Singapore. Lee Kuan Yew ran that country for 3 decades. And I read his book. Lee Kuan Yew has a book called From Third World to First World. He did it very effectively in a lot of ways, but this is no like choke on bong resin, my personal liberty type of leadership here, folks. So, first of all, let's just get that established, not be delusional about that. And in addition to this disturbing, what I would actually agree, pretty disturbing record on civil liberties and human rights, libertarians, Lee Kuan Yew has another commitment which you might find very disturbing. And that commitment of him and the Singaporean government has been to work against social inequality. So an applause for Lee Kuan Yew and the Singaporean government. Yeah, that's right. Last week in the New York Times opinionator, Joseph Stiglitz, of course the great economics professor at Columbia, wrote a piece called Singapore's Lessons for an Unequal America, where he talked. I'm just going to read you a few quotes from this article. Singapore has had the distinction of having prioritized social and economic equity while achieving very high rates of growth over the last 30 years. An example par excellence that inequality is not just a matter of social justice, but of economic performance. Societies with fewer economic disparities perform better, not just for those at the bottom and the middle, but overall. Here are a couple of ways that Singapore has delivered on social equity. And now, libertarians, you're going to get frothing at the mouth as soon as you first hear this first sentence, but let's listen to the whole thing. First, individuals were compelled to take responsibility for their own needs. For example, through savings in their provident fund. Around 90% of Singaporeans became homeowners, compared to about 65% in the United States since the housing bubble burst in 2007. But listen to how this was done. The Singaporean government intervened in the distribution of pre-tax income to help those at the bottom rather than, in the United States, those at the top. It weighed in gently on bargaining between workers and firms, tilting the balance toward the group with less economic power, the workers, in sharp contrast to the United States, where the rules of the game have shifted away from labor and toward capital, especially during the past 3 decades. Singapore created governments that were universal but progressive. While everyone contributed or took personal responsibility, those who were well off contributed more to help those at the bottom, to make sure everyone could live a decent life as defined by what Singaporean society at each stage of its development could afford. Not only did those pay their fair share for public investments, they were asked to contribute even more to help the neediest, which I have to ask, it's stunning to me that anybody is even working in Singapore. I mean, they've been so disincentivized through these tax dollars going to pay for the neediest. And fourth, finally, Singapore has heavy investment in education and scientific research, and education, including paying for some students to study abroad. So libertarians, basically, you have a government forcing you to set aside savings, universal healthcare and education programs that are paid for through progressive taxation, and you can't even spit on the street, let alone smoke a bowl. So, bad news from Singapore for you guys. Sorry about that.
Is there ever good news out of Singapore?
There's great news out of
I'm
Singapore.
just being thanks
Lower
for
inequality. Great environmental policy. Oh, that's the other thing. They also protect the environment through government intervention, which is another pretty terrible thing.
I was being,
I know.
Jeez.
I thought you were queuing me up. No, but what do you think about that? That's kind of mind-blowing, right? Like every day, I've heard that example like several times. What about Singapore? How they gave people health care? And I've always, I studied Singapore a little bit. And I've always known that they were off base, but this just like lays it out. Like, could you imagine if President Obama said, okay, every American needs to save a certain amount of their income mandatorily, which will go into a government savings account to create universal health care system. And incidentally, it'll be progressively indexed, so the poorest will get the most essential coverage.
There would be a massive amount of people holding up signs that said, "Government hands off my whatever government-funded program they're using."
Exactly. That's perfect. That's exactly right.